Boker Tov. Today's daf yomi is Nazir daf Nun Aleph, Nazir 31. And we're going to see now as we come to the top of 51a, the Talmud is discussing rekev. Rekev is corpse dust after the bones of a human being start to decompose. If you have a handful of that dust, that's called rekev, and that transmits tuma, transmits the ritual impurity. It has the sanctity of a dead body, assuming there's enough of it. There's a handful, depending how we define a hand. Today's daf yomi is going to limit the applicability of rekev. Rekev does not apply in all circumstances. It only applies in some of the circumstances. So it says the Talmud, Tanur Rabbanan, Eizu meis sheyesh lo rekev. When do we say that the law of rekev applies? That's only a meis shenikbar arum. It only applies if the body is buried naked, ba'aron shel shayish, in a marble coffin. Meaning to say nothing else can get into the bone dust, to the corpse dust. It has to be buried naked, no shrouds. And also a marble coffin, so that the marble doesn't decompose. Oh, gabe ritzpa shalvanim, or on a stone floor. Zel meishish l'rekev. That's rekev. But nikvar biksuso, let's say he's buried with his garment, a shroud. Everybody's buried with a shroud. Ba'aron shel eitz, or let's say he's buried in a wooden coffin. Everyone's buried with some wooden coffin, in America at least. Oh, gabe ritzpa shalvanim, where he's buried on clay bricks. Zel meishin l'rekev. Then we're not going to apply the principle of rekev. Mean to say, I was thinking about this, that rekev really only applies to a type of person who's buried all by themselves with nothing. And that to that person we're ascribing sanctity even to their dust. Because such a person has been abandoned by the world. Who's buried naked? Now that's the person whose corpse dust we have to treat with absolute holiness. Amr Ula, ein rekev ela b'minat basar, u'minagidim u'minat samos. So rekev said. So Ula taught the rekev is only if it comes from the flesh of the human. The gidim is usually translated as sinews. It means like the tendons that hold the parts of the body together. And the atzamos and the bones. But so Eisvei Rabba Ula, so Rabba challenge Ula, rekev b'minat basar tower. That we have the Brisa states that if the rekev comes from just the flesh, then it's going to be tower. It's not rekev. Hamina etzem, but doesn't that imply that if it comes from the bones, it's tamei? So if we just come from the bones, even without the flesh, it should be tamei. Gemara says Ula's response would be Ema hachi. No, read it like this: rekev hababin abasar tahor. That the rekev that comes from the flesh is tahor achi yesh etzem habasar. Until there's bones mixed in with the flesh, then it will be rekev. Gemara asks, haleka gidim, but what about the fact there's no gidim there? It also contradicts Ula's statement. Gemara says, no, ef shara basar atzamos below gidim. It's impossible for there to be basar and atzamos below gidim. So this reminds me that my question is, so if it's impossible for there to be basar and atzamos without gidim, why does Ula have to mention it? So Tosfos has that question. Ula says he's trying to exclude the case of a nefel. So in this kashua evar begidim, it's trying to exclude the case of a nefel who doesn't have gidim because they don't need it. And the Brisa is talking about meaning a fetus. So Ula is saying a fetus does not make the rekev, and the Brisa is talking about an actual person, and therefore the Brisa says that it's impossible to have the basar and then someone without the gidim. The Gemara had another question. There's a similar Gemara when it talks about the fact that what makes the fish kosher only if there's fins and scales. So the Gemara says, well, every fish that has fins also has scales. Why does the Gemara have to mention scales? So there the Gemara says the answer is lahagda Torah adira, just to emphasize the greatness of Torah to get us reward. But here, the Gemara doesn't ask that question. So Tosfos says, Ula wouldn't be mentioning it for that reason, so it has to give a different answer. Amr of Shmuel bar Abba, Rav Yochanan, Shnei Mason, Shekaver and Zemzeh. Let's say you have two dead bodies. So it says Rav Shmuel bar Abba, the name of Rav Yochanan. Let's say you have two dead bodies that were buried with each other. Hold on 1 second. So it says Rav Shmuel in the name of Yochanan, let's say you have two dead bodies that were buried with each other. Nasu Gilgolan Zelazeh. Then they become like Gilgolan for each other. Gilgolan, in the first, explains that the word Gilgolan means a Megalgal Zelazeh and this Arab Zemzeh. It's like they're mixed up with each other. And so then their Rekev is something else, and then the law of Rekev doesn't apply. So again, if there's a dead body buried with another dead body, we're not going to apply the law of Rekev. So Masav Rav Nasan, Rekev Abba Mishnei Meisim Tameh. So Rav Nasan challenges from a Brisa because the Brisa says if there's Rekev, which comes from two dead bodies, it is Tameh. We do apply the law of Rekev there. So this contradicts what Rav Shmuel bar Abba said in the name of Rabbi Yochanan. So Rava explains that I'm a Rava shekavru zevif ne'atzu zevif ne'atzu. No, the case of the Brisa is where each body was buried on their own. V'irkivu v'amdu amlo Torah vad rekav. So that they know there in that case, each one decomposed on its own and it turned into this corpse dust, and then they combined them to make the requisite amount, the handful of the corpse. That's where we're going to say that the two dead bodies can combine. But if they were decomposing together in the same area, then we're not going to say it's the law of Rekev. Let's say you cut off the hair of a dead body, v'kavro imo, and then you buried this hair with him, then nasa lo gagolan. Then it's going to be considered like it's an alien substance is mixed in, and then we don't apply the law of Rekev. So Tanan Hasan, but we learn in the Mishnah, it's a Mishnah in the 3rd chapter of Olos, Kol Sheb B'Meis Tameh. Anything that comes from a dead body is Tameh. Anything that comes off of a dead body, puts min hashinayim haser v'atziporim. Except for the teeth, the hair, and the fingernails, ubishas biburan kulan tamei. And then when they are connected to the dead body, then those are also Tameh. So this supports this idea that the hair is alien and is megalgalin. So the Gemara says, Chizkiah asked the question about this. Let's say you have, Chizkiah asks, what about the fact, let's say you have hair that is getting ready to be cut, or tzipor and ha'omel gazes, or you have a nail that's getting ready to be sheared, what will be the halacha there? Means say the parts of your body that are not yet cut off, but they're getting ready to be cut off. Mi amrina, and do we say do we say anything that's ready to be cut, it's like it's cut? Or do we say, at this point it's still connected to the body, so we don't view it as it's cut? So the Gemara says, well, why don't we answer this from what? Why don't we answer this from what Rabbi Baruch Hana said? Remember, what did he just say a minute ago? That if you cut the hair and you put it in the grave, it's an alien substance. So time and mishum the gazas, there it was actually cut. Hello, gazas low. So doesn't that mean if it's not yet cut, it's not alien, and therefore the law of Rekev would apply? Versus no, hachikamar gazas harei gagam. No, what Rabbi Baruch Hana was saying, if you cut it off, it's an alien substance. It's gagalim. But low gazas. But if it wasn't yet cut off, by the way, that he's still not sure about. So we don't have an answer to that question. What about the rekev that comes from the heel? The reason why this is a question is the Yerushalmi understands to be that if you lose from your ankle down, it's not considered part of your body anymore. That's a strange Yerushalmi. It's difficult for me to understand, but that's what Yerushalmi says. So in that context, the Gemara wants to know if the heel is going to be considered part of, if the heel is considered part of the body or if it's an alien substance. So the Gemara explains as follows. Rabbi Yirmiyah's question. When we say the law of Rekev, is that only if it comes from the whole body? But if it comes from the heel, it's not considered Rekev. Or maybe there's no distinction. Mar says Tashma, Tani Rav Nasan by Rabbi Oshaya. We're going to come and learn that from the following brisa that Rav Nasan by Rabbi Oshaya taught. Rekev Abba Mishnei Mesim Tamei. That if the Rekev comes from two dead bodies, then we're going to say, that's what Rav Nasan taught, that if the Rekev comes from two dead bodies, then we're going to say that the person, that it is Rekev Abba Mishnei Mesim Tamei. That if the Rekev comes from two dead bodies, we're going to say it is Tamei. V'isakadai, meaning say we combine the Rekev from either one to make the shear. We said that above. V'isakadai tachabam mina ekev. Whoa. And if you're going to say that something comes from the heel is not Rekev, then zil hacha dilma derech ekev kasi. V'hacha dilma derech kasif. Derech ekev kasi. So if you're going to say, so we say Rabbi Nasan taught from the brisa that Rekev comes from two dead bodies is Rekev. But if you're going to say from the heel, it's not Rekev, then maybe this one is from the Rekev and this one is from the Rekev. So therefore it shouldn't be Rekev. So the Gemara says, the Gemara's answer is as follows. So yeah, for sure, if the whole dead body decomposed and then we have within there the heel, that's for sure going to be considered Rekev. But what about a case where one limb decomposed and so one limb decomposed and therefore it came and the whole body didn't decompose, just the leg. And so do we say that the decomposition of the foot caused the heel, and the decomposition of the ekav is going to be something totally separate? And so then we won't say the din of Rekev or not. So Gemara says taken. We leave this question unresolved. Someone explained that the ekev is just a different substance, that it's got this thicker skin on it, and that's why the law of Rekev shouldn't apply. So now Rabbi Yirmiyah asks another question. By Rabbi Yirmiyah, Uber b'mei isha ave galgalamalo. What about if you have a fetus inside a mother, and then the mother dies with the fetus inside her? Rahman al-Atzlan. Do we say that's galgalam or not? Do we say that that's an alien item? Do we say kivim damar uber yerach imo? Do we want to say that since we have a teaching that the fetus is considered to be part of the mother, therefore it's considered part of the body? It's not this alien substance that's impacting the Rekev, and the law of Rekev would apply. Given the sofa, what says, or do we say that since in the end the fetus is going to leave the body, mifresh parish mina, we're going to say it's separate from it. So that's the law. That's the question. Is an uber part of the mother, and then the law of Rekev would apply, or if since it's going to leave, it's not part of it? Bimtim tzalomar uber the sofa, let's say, mifresh parish mina. But if we want to say that since the uber in the end is going to depart from it, therefore it's considered separate, then we have a question. What about the case of on top of 51b, if a woman has male seed in her? So under those circumstances, do we say since it's not fertilized egg, then it's going to be like her body? Say, oh, maybe since it comes externally to her, it's not part of her body. Then we're going to say it's like Megaglin, it's an alien force impacting the Rekev. By Rav Papa now asks another question. Pirshamahu, what about her excrement that's inside her? Do we say since the person can't exist without eating, it's part of her life. and so therefore, since she can't exist without eating, it's part of her. Udoma hanami me'ama asi. Or do we say here also, it's coming from external forces, and therefore it's considered megalgalin. This is a difficult concept also. What about the skin? Do we say the skin of a person is going to be considered like part of their body, and so therefore it's the law of Rekav would apply? Or do we say it's like something external and it doesn't apply? So this is a very difficult idea. How can we say skin? Because there's almost every single death exists with the skin. So the Mefarish says here that some say that it's not skin, but what does it refer to? It refers to the spit. That's what the Mefarish writes. The Mefarish writes, Ro kayotze lo adam shaloi de torech al kivin shema aro lechutz piv vigarono yotze. So that this is something that's just like the spit that comes out of your mouth, so that without any force, without working. So as opposed to the saliva that comes out, which you have to force out. Like if you're just drooling, that's how the Mefarish explains it. So, okay. By Rav Huna bar Manoach Kicho, let's say this is the phlegm that you spit out of your body, Vineo, and this is the mucus that comes out of your nose, Mahu. So we're going to say that those are alien to the body, and that's going to be Megalgalin, and therefore the law of Rekav doesn't apply. So if you think all of these cases, the Ka'amar, Avid Galgal, and all these cases are considered like alien substances. Rekav demitami hechem mishkachas. How can you ever have rekav? So Gemara says, well, you could have it. Ashkaya made the kohen. You gave him some, and the stuff they give you to drink before your colonoscopy. Made the kohen. This is like a palm tree juice. Visachya nasha, and then they gave you a cream to remove all your hair. Vishalku b'mei Tiberia, and they boiled you alive in the hot springs of Tiberias, and so you didn't have any skin either. So you had nothing on your body, and then you have this just decomposed flesh. So that's how we would say the law of Rekav applies. It's a very, very far-fetched scenario. So presumably there's a special reason why we want to say this law of Rekav, but in most cases we don't say it. Amar Abaye Naktinan, we have a principle. Mace shetachana, let's say you ground up the dead body, then ein lo Rekav. Then we're not going to say the law of Rekav. If the body was ground up before it decomposed, we're not going to say Rekav. Ibayu, so Gemara asks the question, Tachano v'chazar v'hirkev ma'u. Let's say you ground it up, and then the body decomposes further. Are we going to apply the principle of Rekav? So, do we say midi utayma? What's the reason for Rekav? Eladika basar v'gidim hatzamos, because there's bones, flesh, and sinews, and that's still here, even though it's ground up. Odoma kibriyaso ba'inon v'leka, or maybe we need that the body to be decomposed from the manner in which it had been created. And that's not here, because here it's decomposed dirt. So the Gemara says teku, unresolved. Tani ua bar chanina meis shechaser. Let's say this dead body is missing a limb when it dies, ein lo Rekav. We're not going to apply the principle of Rekav, v'lo tfusa, v'lo shtunas kivros. So, what is this case of tfusa and shtunas kavaros? So if a body dies and it's missing a limb, we're not going to apply the law of Rekav. And also, we're going to learn about the law of tfusa, which doesn't apply. What's the law of tfusa? Tosfos tells us that if you find the dead body on the road, so normally, if you just find the dead body on its own, now you want to bury it in a graveyard, you have to take it with the tfusasa. You have to take it with all the earth that's around it that you dig up 3 fingers from the ground. You basically dig up 3 fingers worth of the ground, and you take it with the dead body. And shlunas kvaros, this is also going to explain in the last chapter of Nazir. So where we say, let's say you find 3 dead bodies, and if there are between them between 4 and 8 amos, that's called a graveyard already. Once there are 3 dead bodies, it's called a graveyard. And so then you're not allowed to move the grave. So, but if you find only 1 or 2, then it's going to be considered shkunas. Then it's not a graveyard, and you can move the body. So under these circumstances, if the 3 dead bodies, if one of them was missing a limb, then we're not going to say the law of that it's not a cemetery. You need to have 3 dead bodies that are not missing a limb. So therefore, but we're going to focus now only on the first part, that Ua Bar Chanina taught if it's a dead body that's missing a limb, the law of Rekav doesn't apply. So so we challenge this statement of Ua Bar Chanina. Well, Imamarta, how do we challenge this? We challenge this from a Mishnah in Adios, who says that there are some laws that apply to a limb that falls off of a living person, and some that apply to a limb that falls off of a dead person. Meaning to say, we want to know, the Gemara in the Mishnah in Adios is discussing whether or not we say that an outsized portion of flesh that falls off of a living person is going to transmit to Tumah, like an outsized portion of flesh that falls off of a dead person. So for halacha, we don't say that this limb is metame unless it has the flesh, the bones, and the sinews. So for halacha, we're not going to say that, but the Mishnah Adios is discussing it. And at first, they want to say that we're going to say that a limb that falls off a living person, it has the same law as a limb that falls off a dead person. And we say, well, if you're going to say that the law of a limb by a dead body is metame, rove, it has majority of the body, verova, or it has a certain amount of bones, or malo tarvad rekev, or the law of rekev applies to it. Tomar b'chai, are you going to say this principle also by a limb that falls off of a living creature? She'ino lo rov, lo rov, lo malo tarvad rekev. So that there we don't apply these principles that if it has the majority of the body or the certain amount of bones or rekev. So heichi dami, what's the case? The irkev chad aver must be the case where we're saying that the law of rekev doesn't apply to a limb in a case where one limb decomposed, the kavase gabe mace, but by a dead body, I feel chad aver, even if it's just one limb, we would say the law of rekev. So this is a ikarekev. So this is a contradiction to Ua Bar Chanina, who says that if the dead body is missing a limb, we don't say rekev. And here we say even by one limb, we would say that the law of rekev applies. Umar says no. Mika tani ha mace. Does the Mishnah really say that if the dead body has one limb, it will be rekev? Ha kamash malon shum mace yesh lo rekev. Shum chai ein lo rekev. No, it's just saying that it doesn't say that this dead piece of limb has a rekev. It says that by a dead body there is a law of rekev, as opposed to a live person there's no rekev. So then by Rava asked the question, let's say the limb decomposed while the person was alive, the chazer v'meis, and then the person died, and now we have this decomposed limb. Mahu. Do we combine this? Do we say that now the law of rekev applies to it? When do we say the law of rekev? When it decomposes after he's dead. Or maybe now he's dead. Where says Tashma, well, Imamarta, B'meis, Sheyesh Rov, Verova, Molei Tarvad rekev. Where it says, no, if you're going to say by a dead body, we apply the law of rekev, where we have other laws that are unique to a dead body because you have the majority of the bones, or a certain amount of bones, or a handful of corpse dust. Tomer b'chai, or we're going to say by a living creature where those don't apply. Time is shum chai. So when he's alive, we're not going to say rekev. Mace, but if he would die, yesh lo rekev, then we would say that this limb now has corpse dust. Gemara says no, same answer. Mikatana ha mace. Do we say by this dead body we apply the law of rekev? Hakamas when the shum mace yesh lo rekev. No, the law of rekev applies in general to a dead body, but Shum chai, but by a living creature, ain lo rekev. There's no law of rekev, and so that's the Gemara's discussion of rekev. So now we'll stop the recording. We'll continue.